I've gone back and forth on whether I should even tell this story, because the longer I sit with it, the more I realize it wasn't just something scary that happened one night. It was something that changed the way I think about being alone. Not the dramatic kind of alone where you're lost in the woods or stranded somewhere far from help. I mean the normal, everyday kind of alone. The kind you don't think twice about. Because before this happened, I loved being by myself. I'm the kind of person who actually enjoyed quiet houses, rainy nights, and empty rooms. I used to think there was something comforting about knowing nothing else was around. After that night, that feeling never fully came back. This happened a few years ago, and even now, there are details I can't explain without feeling stupid for saying them out loud. But I know what I heard, I know what I saw, and I know the moment when my brain finally accepted that something was wrong, even though it desperately tried to explain it away. It was a rainy night, the kind of rain that feels heavier than normal, not loud enough to be a storm, but steady and relentless, like it's trying to soak through everything. I was 26 at the time and living alone in a small rental house just outside a quiet suburban neighborhood. It wasn't old or creepy, just one of those plain houses built in the late 90s. Beige siding, small front porch, narrow backyard. Nothing about it ever made me uneasy before. That night, I remember feeling almost relaxed. I'd had a long week at work, and I was actually looking forward to being home with no plans. I ordered takeout, kicked off my shoes, and let the sound of the rain fill the house. It was late fall, so it got dark early, and by around 7, the windows were already black mirrors reflecting the inside of the house. I ate on the couch, half watching something on TV, half scrolling through my phone. The rain kept picking up, tapping against the windows and roof in uneven rhythms. Sometime around 9, the power flickered for a second. Not enough to shut anything off, just enough to notice. I remember glancing toward the kitchen light and thinking nothing of it. Power flickers happen sometimes during heavier rain. Around 10, I turned everything off and headed to bed. My bedroom was at the end of a short hallway, with the bathroom across from it and a small laundry closet just before the bedroom door. I left a small lamp on in the living room, more out of habit than fear. The rain was still steady, and it actually helped me fall asleep. I don't know exactly how long I'd been asleep when something pulled me out of it. At first, I couldn't tell what it was. I was in that half-awake state where your body is still heavy and your thoughts feel slow. I lay there listening, trying to separate dream sounds from real ones. The rain was still there, but underneath it was something else. A faint, irregular noise. It sounded like a soft thud, followed by a pause, then another. At first, my brain labeled it as a branch hitting the side of the house or maybe something falling over outside. I checked my phone. It was 2:17 a.m. The sound came again, a little louder this time. Thud, pause, thud. It wasn't rhythmic enough to be dripping water, and it wasn't sharp enough to be something hitting the siding hard. It sounded deliberate. That was the first word that popped into my head, and I immediately tried to replace it with something more logical. I told myself it was probably the rain causing something to shift outside. I rolled onto my side, facing the wall, and closed my eyes. A few seconds later, the sound came again, closer. That's when I realized it wasn't coming from outside at all. It was coming from inside the house, specifically from somewhere down the hallway. My stomach tightened in that instant, the way it does when your body reacts before your brain fully understands why. I lay completely still, barely breathing, listening. The rain masked a lot of sound, but underneath it, I could hear something moving. Not footsteps exactly, but a soft dragging noise like fabric or bare skin brushing against the floor. It stopped just outside my bedroom door. I stared at the darkness, my eyes fixed on the faint outline of the door frame. I didn't hear breathing, didn't hear anything that clearly sounded like a person. Just silence, broken only by the rain. I told myself it was nothing, that I was half asleep and my mind was filling in gaps. I'd lived alone for years without incident. There was no reason for anyone to be in my house. Slowly, I reached for my phone on the nightstand and turned the screen on, keeping the brightness low. The glow felt too bright in the dark room, and I quickly angled it away from the door. I sat there for a minute, waiting. Nothing happened. No sounds. No movement. Eventually, my heart rate slowed, just enough for me to feel foolish. I almost laughed quietly at myself. That's when I heard it again. This time, there was no mistaking it. A soft knock, not on the front door, not on the bedroom door either. It sounded like it came from the hallway wall itself. A dull, hollow knock, as if someone had tapped their knuckles against drywall. My chest felt tight, like the air had been sucked out of it. I sat up slowly, my eyes locked on the bedroom door. Another knock followed, slightly lower, like whatever made it was moving along the wall. Knock, paused, knock. I whispered out loud without meaning to. Just one word. Hello? My voice sounded weak and unfamiliar in the dark. There was no response. Instead, the sound shifted. I heard something scrape softly against the hallway carpet, followed by the unmistakable creak of the floor near the laundry closet. That's when fear really set in. The layout of my house flashed through my mind in detail. I knew exactly where that sound was. Too well. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and opened the camera, thinking if I needed to call someone, I wanted proof. I don't know why that thought mattered in the moment. Maybe part of me still believed I was overreacting. I slipped out of bed, my feet cold against the floor, and moved toward the door as quietly as I could. I rested my hand on the doorknob and listened. The rain outside seemed louder now, pounding against the roof. The sound in the hallway stopped completely. I stood there for what felt like minutes, my hand frozen on the knob. Finally, I cracked the door open just enough to see into the hallway. The living room lamp was still on, casting a dim yellow glow down the hall. Everything looked normal, empty. The laundry closet door was closed, the bathroom door was shut. No shadows where there shouldn't be any. I opened the door a little wider and leaned my head out. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The carpet in the hallway, right in front of the laundry closet, was slightly disturbed, like something heavy had been dragged across it. The fibers were flattened in a long, uneven line, leading from the living room toward my bedroom. I stared at it, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. I knew I hadn't left anything there. There was nothing in my house that would make a mark like that. As I stood there, frozen, I heard a soft sound behind me. Not in the hallway, in my bedroom. A faint, wet noise, like someone slowly exhaling through their nose. I spun around, my heart slamming so hard I thought I might pass out. The room was empty. My bed was just as I'd left it. The window was closed, but the sound came again. Closer this time, right near my ear. I bolted out of the room without thinking, sprinting down the hallway toward the living room. I slipped slightly on the carpet, but caught myself, adrenaline carrying me forward. I flicked on every light as I went, the house flooding with harsh brightness. I stood in the middle of the living room, gasping for breath, scanning every corner. Nothing. No one. The house was exactly how it always was. Too normal. That almost made it worse. I grabbed my keys and wallet, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice, and ran out the front door into the rain. I didn't even bother locking it. I got in my car, slammed the door, and just sat there, breathing hard, rain hammering against the windshield. I called my brother first, then a friend, then finally the police, when neither answered right away. I don't even remember what I said to the dispatcher, only that my voice sounded panicked and distant to my own ears. When the police arrived, they searched the house thoroughly. Doors, windows, closets, attic access. Nothing was disturbed. No signs of forced entry. No footprints, no fingerprints. Nothing. They asked if I might have been dreaming, if I'd taken anything, if I'd been stressed lately. I answered their questions numbly, feeling embarrassed and frustrated. They left after about 30 minutes, clearly unconcerned. I didn't go back inside that night. I drove to my brother's place and slept on his couch with all the lights on. The next day, in the daylight, the house looked even more harmless. I went back with him to get some clothes, telling myself I'd overreacted, that I'd let my imagination get the best of me. That explanation almost worked. Almost, until I went into my bedroom and noticed something new. The carpet beside my bed was flattened, just like the hallway. A long, uneven impression running along the side of the mattress as if something had been lying there, right next to me, for a long time. I moved out a week later. I never heard the sounds again, never saw anything else. But sometimes, on rainy nights, when the house is quiet and the world feels small, I swear I can still hear that soft knock, somewhere just beyond the wall, waiting for me to notice it again. I've rewritten this in my head more times than I can count, mostly trying to convince myself that I misunderstood what happened, that stress or coincidence filled in the blanks. But every version ends the same way, and that's why I'm finally putting it down like this. This wasn't a dream, and it wasn't my imagination running wild. It was a normal night that turned into something I still can't explain, and it happened because I was alone, because it was raining, and because I made the mistake of assuming that isolation meant safety. At the time, I was 29 and living in a small upstairs apartment above an old auto repair shop on the edge of town. The shop had closed years before, so the entire building was basically mine. My apartment was on the second floor, accessed by a narrow metal staircase on the side of the building. No neighbors, no shared walls, no noise complaints. It was cheap, quiet, and exactly what I wanted. I worked nights from home, so my schedule was already a little off for most people. Rainy nights were my favorite. They made the world feel distant, like I was sealed off from everything else. That night started the same way. Heavy rain, steady and cold, tapping against the windows and drumming on the rusted metal roof below my floor. I remember making coffee around midnight, even though I knew I shouldn't, just because I liked the routine. The lights in the apartment were dim, mostly lamps, and the rain made the shadows feel softer instead of threatening. Around 1 in the morning, I finished what I was working on and shut my laptop. I stretched, glanced out the window, and noticed how empty the street looked. No cars, no people, just rain pooling under the streetlight and flowing along the curb. That's when I saw the first thing that didn't make sense. The staircase light was on. That light was on a motion sensor, and it only stayed lit for about a minute when someone walked past it. I hadn't used the stairs in hours. I stood there watching it, waiting for it to shut off. It didn't. It stayed on, buzzing faintly, illuminating the wet steps. I told myself it was probably glitching because of the rain. Old wiring, old building. That explanation satisfied me enough to pull the blinds closed and head to the bathroom to get ready for bed. While I was brushing my teeth, I heard a sound that made me stop mid-motion. It was faint, almost lost under the rain, but it was distinct. A metallic clink, followed by a soft scrape. It sounded like someone touching the handrail on the stairs. I froze, toothpaste dripping into the sink, listening. The sound came again, slower this time. Clink, scrape. My heart started beating harder, but I still wasn't scared yet. Not really. I told myself it was probably a piece of loose metal shifting in the wind. The stairs were old and exposed. I rinsed my mouth, wiped my face, and stood there listening for another minute. Nothing. The rain continued, steady and heavy. I went into my bedroom and turned off the lights, leaving only a small lamp on the nightstand. I lay down and pulled the blanket up, scrolling through my phone to distract myself. That's when I heard footsteps. Not outside, inside the building. Slow, deliberate steps on metal. Someone was climbing the stairs. Each step was careful, spaced out, like whoever it was didn't want to make noise. My stomach tightened instantly. I sat up in bed, phone clutched in my hand, listening. Step, pause, step, pause. The sound grew closer until it stopped right outside my apartment door. I held my breath, staring at the door in the dim light. I could hear the rain louder now, pounding against the roof, but underneath it was another sound. Breathing. Shallow, uneven breathing, right on the other side of the door. I stayed perfectly still, afraid that even shifting my weight would give me away. After a few seconds, the breathing stopped. Then came a soft sound, like fingertips brushing against the doorframe. My pulse was so loud in my ears I was sure it could be heard through the door. I waited for a knock, for the handle to turn, for something definitive. Instead, there was a slow drag along the door from top to bottom, like someone running their nails or something hard along the wood. The sound made my skin crawl. I grabbed my phone and quietly dialed 911, keeping the screen turned away from the door. As it rang, the sound stopped abruptly. Silence. The dispatcher answered, and I whispered, explaining that someone was outside my apartment door. As I spoke, I heard movement again, but this time it was retreating. Slow steps moving away from the door, back down the stairs. I stayed on the line, watching the door, my whole body tense. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way and to stay inside, stay quiet. After a minute or two, the staircase light flicked off, plunging the outside into darkness. I thought that was the end of it. The police arrived about 15 minutes later. They searched the stairs, the area around the building, and the empty shop below. No one was there. No signs of forced entry. No footprints on the stairs, even though they were wet. The officers were polite, but clearly skeptical. One of them suggested maybe someone had taken shelter from the rain and left when they realized the building was occupied. That explanation didn't sit right with me, but I nodded anyway. After they left, I tried to sleep, telling myself the worst was over. I must have drifted off eventually, because the next thing I remember is waking up to complete silence. The rain had stopped. The sudden quiet felt wrong, like the world had been muted. I checked my phone. 3:42 a.m. I was just starting to relax when I heard it. A sound inside my apartment. Not footsteps this time. A soft, rhythmic tapping. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the living room. My bedroom door was open, and I could see the dark outline of the couch and coffee table beyond it. The tapping continued, slow and steady, like someone knocking on glass. I listened, frozen, trying to pinpoint the source. Tap, tap, tap. Then I realized what it was. Someone was tapping on the inside of my window. My blood ran cold. The windows were on the second floor. There was no balcony, no fire escape, nothing anyone could stand on. I slowly slid out of bed and crept toward the living room, my heart pounding so hard it made me dizzy. The tapping stopped as soon as I moved. I stood there in the doorway, staring at the window. The blinds were partially open, just enough to let in the faint glow of the streetlight. I took another step forward. That's when the tapping resumed, faster now. Tap, 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 tap. I could see a shape through the glass, distorted by the reflection and the darkness. Something pressed close to the window, blocking the light. I stumbled backward, nearly falling, and the tapping stopped instantly. Then came the sound of breathing again, this time muffled, like someone exhaling against the glass. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife I could find, and backed myself into the corner, keeping my eyes on the window. I don't know how long I stood there, shaking, waiting for something to happen. Eventually, the shape moved away, the light returned, and the window was empty. I didn't wait for anything else. I grabbed my keys, bolted out the door, and ran down the stairs, not caring how loud I was. I drove to a friend's house and stayed there until morning. When I went back later that day with two friends, we checked everything. The window was intact. No marks, no cracks, no signs that anyone had been there. But when I looked closely at the glass, I noticed faint smudges at about face level. Long, uneven streaks, like something had been pressed against it for a long time. I moved out a month later. I never found out who or what was on those stairs that night. But I don't live alone anymore. And whenever it rains at night, I make sure every window is covered, because I still can't shake the feeling that something out there remembers where I used to live and knows I noticed it. I've hesitated to share this for a long time, mostly because I still don't know how to explain what happened without sounding like I'm exaggerating or leaving things out. But the truth is, the scariest part of that night wasn't anything dramatic or supernatural in the way people expect. It was how normal everything felt, right up until the moment it didn't anymore. This wasn't a haunted house or a creepy abandoned place. It was my home. A place I felt safe in. A place I was completely alone in on a rainy night, just like I'd been hundreds of times before. This happened when I was 31, and at the time, I was renting a small, single-story house in a quiet, residential area. The kind of neighborhood where nothing ever really happened. Families, parked cars lining the street, porch lights turning off around 10. I worked a standard daytime job, so my nights were usually uneventful. That night had been especially calm. It had been raining since late afternoon. Not hard, but steady enough that the ground was soaked and the air smelled damp. By the time it got dark, the rain had picked up, tapping against the windows and roof in a constant, low sound that filled the house. I remember thinking it was the kind of night where you just stay in, order food, and shut the world out. I ate dinner on the couch, watching TV with the volume low, more for background noise than anything else. Outside, the street was empty, the rain reflecting the glow of the streetlights. Around 11, I locked the front door, checked the back door like I always did, and turned off most of the lights. I left one lamp on in the living room and another small one in the bedroom. The house felt quiet and still, but not in a bad way, just peaceful. I went to bed a little after midnight, listening to the rain and scrolling on my phone until my eyes got heavy. I don't know exactly when I fell asleep, but I woke up suddenly with that sharp feeling you get when something pulls you out of a dream too fast. For a few seconds, I didn't know why I was awake. The room was dark except for the faint glow of the lamp, and the rain was still falling outside. Then I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. It was faint, almost lost under the rain, but once I noticed it, I couldn't unhear it. A soft clicking noise coming from somewhere in the house. Click, pause, click. It reminded me of the sound a door makes when it's not fully latched and someone gently presses against it. My first thought was the wind. Old houses make noise, especially in the rain. I rolled onto my side, facing away from the door, and tried to ignore it. The sound came again, closer this time. Click, click, pause. My stomach tightened. I opened my eyes and stared at the wall, listening. The sound stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but the rain. I was just starting to relax when I heard something else. Footsteps. Slow, careful footsteps, moving across the floor. They weren't heavy, but they weren't subtle either. Whoever was making them wasn't trying very hard to hide. The steps moved from the living room toward the hallway. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I told myself it had to be my imagination, that I was half asleep and my brain was filling in sounds. But then the footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, staring at the door, waiting for the handle to turn. It didn't. Instead, I heard a soft sound, like fabric brushing against the door. Something pressed lightly against it, just enough to make the wood creak. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my hands shaking. The screen felt blindingly bright in the dark, and I quickly turned the brightness down. I checked the time. 2:06 a.m. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. I just listened. Whatever was outside the door stayed there, completely still. The silence stretched on, broken only by the rain outside. After what felt like several minutes, I heard the footsteps again, moving away from the door and back down the hallway. I exhaled slowly, trying to calm myself. I told myself it had to be the house settling, or maybe the rain causing something to shift. I almost convinced myself it was nothing. Almost. Then I heard the back door. A soft creak, followed by that same clicking sound. My blood ran cold. I knew that sound. It was the sound of the back door handle being turned slowly. I sat up in bed, my whole body tense, listening as the handle turned again. Click. Pause. Click. Whoever it was seemed to be testing it, gently, like they didn't want to make noise. I grabbed my phone and quietly dialed 911, holding it close to my chest. As it rang, the sound stopped. The dispatcher answered, and I whispered, telling her someone was trying to get into my house. She asked me where I was, if I was alone, if the door was locked. I answered as quietly as I could. As I was speaking, I heard the footsteps again, this time closer, faster. They moved from the back of the house toward the living room. I could hear the floor creaking under the weight of someone walking across it. The dispatcher told me officers were on the way and to stay where I was. I didn't argue. I stayed in bed, phone pressed to my ear, staring at the bedroom door. The footsteps stopped again, this time just outside my room. I could hear breathing now. Slow, uneven breathing, like someone was trying to control it. The door handle rattled slightly, just once. I felt like my heart was going to explode. I whispered into the phone that whoever it was at my door. The dispatcher told me to stay calm, that help was close. Then the breathing stopped. The handle didn't move again. After a few seconds, I heard the footsteps retreat, moving quickly back down the hallway. A moment later, the front door creaked open and then slammed shut. I stayed on the line until the police arrived. They searched the house thoroughly, inside and out. No signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no open windows. They asked me if I was sure I'd locked the back door. I was. I always locked it. They suggested maybe I'd been dreaming, or that someone had knocked and run off. I knew that wasn't true, but I didn't argue. They left after about half an hour. I didn't sleep at all after that. I sat on the couch with all the lights on until morning. When the sun came up, the house looked normal. Too normal. I walked through every room, checking everything. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The back door was locked, just like I remembered, but on the inside of the door, near the handle, there were faint smudges, long, uneven marks, like someone had pressed their fingers there repeatedly. They weren't there before. I wiped them away with a paper towel, my hands shaking. I moved out 2 weeks later. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that if I stayed, whatever had come into my house that night would come back. Even now, years later, I can't sleep comfortably when it rains. Every creak, every click, every soft sound makes my heart race, because I know how quickly a normal night can turn into something else, and how being alone doesn't always mean you're the only one there.